The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Fantasy Football. Today we're going through some NFL news and notes, how that affects the top 200 my rankings, which you can find in the description of this video or podcast. I will update them after the show so they reflect everything that we're talking about right here, because there's a lot of stuff that we might need to move up, move down. Some guys have opted out. Other guys have been cut from their teams that maybe I drafted on the one team that I've taken so far. So we got to figure out some replacements for these guys too. Plus, we're going to review some of the Flex League drafts, the drafts that Jake Ciely runs, and just see some of the different trends and maybe some surprises in different builds from different spots. I drafted my team with Tim Andercust live on this show. The team, I don't hate it as much as I thought I did at the time. It's still not great, but I definitely zigged when everyone else zagged. But I've had a lot of success doing that in the past. I'm not playing for second place. I'm playing for first place. For second, last, all the same to me. I'm not here for runners up. So if that strategy ends up working, and I'll talk it through with Jake here, because he has a very similar team that he did in his auction, just maybe how you build, like if you have the fifth pick, because that's a really tough spot to be in. If you want to find the entire Fantasy Football 2020 kit, you can find it for free in the description of the video and podcast. Has all the RB player profiles, the rankings, the debates, the strategy, everything is there in one handy spot if you want to go check it out. Please smash the like button for this episode and tell me which Washington running back you think is going to score the most fantasy points in 2020. It could be none. Could be an answer for that. You just fade the entire board. But I'm curious to see, because there's like 6 options that you could potentially have now. Jake and I are going to hammer that out to find out who the guy that maybe you should take is. We'll even see about that. Also, please rate and review the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. Ton of fantasy football, along with the regular UFC and golf and nonsense coming at you. New shows every single day. You might want to go check that out. Tell a friend while you're at it. Too. Jake Ciely from theathletic.com is on the line. What's going on, my man?
Not too much. Yeah, that team, which we're going to be talking about. Yes, you have, like one running back left now because of the Darius Guice news. Unfortunately, I'm with you. I have so much Darius Guice, and I'm in a tough spot now.
Well, I was just surprised at how I wasn't planning on taking Darius Guice when we had done that draft. The problem is he was there in like the 9th round. I was like, yeah, I'll roll the dice on this. This seems like a pretty decent idea. Not a good idea, as it turns out.
No, the problem was you got Andercust, and you shouldn't have drafted with him because you lost him, and then you had Damian Harris, and they ended up signing Lamar Miller. So like you should have just drafted with Tim. That was your problem.
Yeah. That is always a problem. Although him and I, when we do teams together, it usually turns out pretty well. Fortunately, when you play like 0 RB, or at least like half a decent RB and then none else, not even by design, that if you're running back, I'm put it this way, I'm much happier I'm losing my scrub running backs than all the good players I have at the other positions.
That is true, yeah. Because if you lost like Michael Thomas today, like you wouldn't be recovering from that.
True. So Darius Guice has been cut by the Washington Footballs. That leaves a backfield. I mean, what are we calling them? Are we calling like the Washington Football Team?
I just did the football. So I just did a podcast this morning where it sounds so weird. I almost called them their old name. And then when they're referencing the team, they said, so the backup running back for the football team. I was like, that just sounds so stupid.
Yeah, let's just call them the Footballs for now.
I like the Footballs. That's better.
As we go through it. So Guice is out. He has domestic violence charges brought up against him. Apparently he had a history of this. Washington wanted nothing to do with it, so they just cut him outright. That leaves Adrian Peterson. It leaves Peyton Barber, who's apparently on this team. My guy, Peyton Barber. Antonio Gibson, Bryce Love, and J.D. McKissick to choose from. So the two that I think that we really need to hammer down on, Adrian Peterson and Antonio Gibson. I looked at drafts from Friday to today, and the highest Adrian Peterson went in any of those drafts was 74th overall. The highest Antonio Gibson went in those drafts was 83rd overall. So 6th round pick, 7th round pick. They're generally going later than that. That was the high end of the range in some of these high stakes leagues. But news came out today. It's like, hey, Peyton Barber, we can see is an every down back. And you know what, Jake? I see it, because Peyton Barber is much like Jordan Howard. You just put him on a team, they're like, let's give that guy the ball. Like, apparently people love Peyton Barber. Like, he's just a really good guy, and they want to see him, at least give him opportunity to do well. But if you had to choose, like, everyone is just riding Antonio Gibson's jock right now, but yeah. I think it might get a bit out of control here.
I think it will get a little out of control with Gibson. And so when I updated the rankings, Gibson fell at 42 for me. He didn't move that far because I already had him somewhat high. Adrian Peterson jumped to 43. I don't have Peyton Barber because you know what Peyton Barber is, Pat? You know what? I'm gonna even curse on your show for you. Peyton Barber is the chicken shit way out. It's like, oh, I don't want to fail, so let me use this guy that I know I can trust. He'll go out there and get me my 3.8 yards per carry. And he is. Jordan Howard's a good comparison. Like, you don't go wrong with Jordan Howard, but what do you do right with Jordan Howard? Nothing. That's why everybody's always trying to replace him and send him to a new team. That's the same thing with Peyton Barber. Like, have some balls. Go with somebody like that's good or has upside. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think the Peyton Barber talk is just that it's coach speak time. We're talking up this is the same team that called 18 different guys their version of Christian McCaffrey, including Antonio Gibson. Like, chill the hell out. But I think Antonio Gibson's biggest concern is that even in the best case scenario, which before this, as the timeshare piece to Darius Guice and Adrian Peterson just falls out of the picture, is he's just going to be the complementary piece. He's going to be 8 to maybe the most you see is 15 touches per week. Great RB3, great upside. He'll have some weeks where he finishes at RB1, but that's who he is. Like, he's never going to be the go-to 70% of the work. You don't want him as that. You know, maybe he shocks us. Maybe he turns into Austin Eckler, but I don't think that's who he is. So I think Adrian Peterson's going to have some value. I think the one sneaky one, if you're in a super deep draft, is Bryce Love, because they did draft him to be the new Chris Thompson last year. But the problem he has going against him is he has no touches, and now he's playing for a new regime. This isn't the regime that drafted him. They drafted Gibson. They didn't draft Bryce Love. So that comes into play too. I think it'll be muddy. And I will say this, Pat, I hate to say it because I've been the one that's like, hey, we're going to get 16 games. We're playing the NFL season. But just as a side thought, I just want to throw this out there for everybody that's like, oh, I'll wait to week 8. I'll wait to week 10. I'll get the game winner in the second half of the season. I might just lean and take Adrian Peterson because at least I know for the first 4, 5, 6 weeks, he's the guy. Like, let's not be like ignoring the fact that maybe the season gets cut short at 12 games.
Yeah, front load your teams. Yeah, don't be playing for the second half. Although during like championship week, I guess I don't even know how that would work. I think you need to implement rules in your league and have a very clear discussion about what happens if the season is canceled. Does everyone get their money back? Do we call it where it is? Or this wouldn't. I mean, I don't like total points leagues, but if there was ever a year to run one, it feels like this would be the year. Like, I hate best ball, but best ball is a much better option. Also, DraftKings just released a best ball product. I suggest everyone go play it. But it has a bit more value this year than I think it does in any other year. Like, I don't know what the numbers you've seen on your fantasy football stuff so far, but I can just speak from not only me, but my numbers, and maybe these two things are directly correlated, that I haven't had the same, I am usually hyped for football by now. And I just feel like there's so much uncertainty, not necessarily around it happening, because it looks like it's definitely going to happen, at least for week 1, and then we'll see where we go from there. It's just, I'm still pessimistic about what the overall upside is, that I've been far less engaged with it than I normally would be the second week of August.
Well, it's twofold. It's one is we saw what happened with baseball, and everybody's obviously pensive when we look at that as an example. The fact that I guess actually threefold, because that's one. Two is the NFL is not doing what the NBA and NHL did and created bubbles, and we see how well that's working. Both of them just had 0 test positive again, so it proves that works. And baseball has been going the opposite direction. St. Louis has still only played 5 games or something like that. So we saw what happened with Miami and St. Louis. So I think that's kind of 2 points in one, is that everybody sees what happened, is legitimately scared something's going to happen in the NFL. Teams are going to miss time, players are going to miss time, whatever it might be. But the second part of it is because there's no preseason, it doesn't feel like it. Like, we would have had our second week of preseason. We would have had games to watch and see what the snaps were and see who's getting the first touches and all the stuff that usually we talk about every single year, is not overblowing that information and putting too much value into who got first team reps and all that type of stuff. But it gives us something to watch and talk about. And without that, I think that's the problem, is that people are just still in this mode of like, it's only 3.5 weeks away. And it's still like, is it really coming? Do we know? Like, it is. But at the same time, I think that's the problem.
So I had a discussion with a lot of my league mates, the one where I'm the commissioner, to try to figure some of this stuff out. I think that we're going to temporarily implement 2 extra bench spots this year per roster, just to kind of give yourself an out, because there's going to be nothing worse than, you know how people like to late stack in DraftKings? Like, there would be nothing worse than I don't know, playing someone on Thursday night and oh, I'm going to hammer this guy. I have all my team in the Monday night game. Then all of a sudden, half the team tests positive and they cancel the game. I don't even know how that's going to be scored. So I would probably just want to front load everything as I'm going along. Like, I mean, of course, I want to play the right matchups and everything like that. But I think that where normally it wouldn't be a big deal whatsoever, I think you need to look at that for one thing. And with the kickoff being September 10th this year, like if you can do your draft September 9th, that would probably be preferable.
Well, yeah, the weekend before that's Labor Day weekend, so that you get a built-in day of no. Well, I was gonna say off from work, but I think still 90% of the people aren't even going to work anyway. Like, they're working, but you understand what I'm saying. I'm with you. I threw that out, and you mocked it, and I said, if you want to play best ball weekly, I was again just giving more people like you're doing right now. Give more options. All the flex leagues went to 18 roster spots instead of 16 to give 2 additional bench spots. There's talk about, if we find out that it's going to be sketchy in some leagues, do we do a best ball weekly so you don't have to worry about that? Some people have thrown out, Pat, team quarterback, not team running back and team wide receiver, but team quarterback in case Dak Prescott gets COVID for Monday Night Football and they have to go with the backup. So those type of things. And I'm not saying anyways the right way. You guys do what you want to do. I think the biggest point is what you said to start this all off is have a plan before the season starts. Don't be trying to figure this out in week 2. Your season ending, what the rosters are going to be, what the weekly scenarios are going to be, all that type of stuff. Figure that out before the season starts.
We haven't spoken since Damian Williams opted out on the season, leaving the Fresh Prince of Helaire just being like a top 5 pick all of a sudden. Like, where would you rather have Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Miles Sanders?
Miles Sanders.
Okay. So
one spot.
So you're not getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire in drafts because he's going as high as 4th and 5th overall now.
I went from having 100%, I'll pull up my rosters, from having 100% of Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I was the insane person taking him in the 2nd round, possibly even in the end of the 1st. Then the news comes out, and all of a sudden, I hate Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, the thing is, he didn't move for me. He's still 8th. As much as I don't like Derrick Henry and am discounting him from what he did last year, I say regressing him a little bit in my projections, as much as I have that, as much as Miles Sanders has the Doug Peterson effect, but he finally has a bell cow and they really haven't added anybody. As much as if you don't even like those 2 guys, I just don't see how you put Edwards-Helaire in front of them. And I'm the Edwards-Helaire guy. You and I talked about this on 2 different shows now. And the thing about Edwards-Helaire is I don't need him to get 20 carries a game. He's not going to get 20 carries a game. He's probably going to settle in a 14 to 18 touch, maybe even some weeks he might get 20, but probably in that range most weeks. And that's great. He's on a great offense to do so. And he does have top 5 upside. But I just don't see how you take him in front of those guys. And especially if he's going to go 5th overall, that means it's either in front of Kamara or Cook. I think that's batshit crazy. Now I threw out 2 shits for you. Actually, that's 3 now.
So in the one that I was in, the PPR Flex Snake Draft, he went 11th overall. But over the weekend, I've just looked at some of these high-stakes leagues. Not all just high-stakes leagues, but since last Friday through Wednesday, right now, a sample of 23 drafts I'm looking at that right now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going as the average ADP of 6 overall, as high as 4th, as low as 16th. And Miles Sanders is going at ADP 10.
Did you see where Clyde Edwards-Helaire went in the Superflex Flex League? So the first 5 picks, McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, Jackson, Mahomes, then Edwards-Helaire goes at 106 in front of Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon. Like, that's where he went. Like, I understand it. And I understand it for the argument. Like, if you don't take him there, you're not going to get him because he is now in the 1st round. And if you want him, you're going to have to. But at the same time, where's the potential return? I preach this every single year, Pat, is don't buy all the risk. And it's hard not to buy all the risk in the 1st round in general because it's the 1st round. But at the same time, Edwards-Helaire, to return that value, has to be everything we think he could potentially be. And there's just so much from being a rookie. And again, this is coming from the guy that was crazy high on him. And it's weird that I went from being crazy high to the voice of reason.
The biggest thing to me, and you kind of hit on it, is that you've now bought out all the upside on this. Like the other guys that are currently inside, like the consensus top 4 picks, McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, and Kamara. You can even throw Henry or Cook. Sanders suffers from a little bit of this, but at least we've seen him, is that now when he's going 6th overall, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or 5th overall, there is still the unknown of what his actual upside is. We can project it out on paper like, oh, he's Brian Westbrook, but better. But we also don't know what the downside is. The thing that he doesn't have in common with the other guys, they have a track record of doing this over multiple seasons where he does not. So that's what would make me pensive about taking him that highly. I think at the back end of the first round, sure. But I don't see a substantial difference in the outcomes between Clyde Edwards-Helaire and, let's say, someone like Kenyon Drake. I think that the upside is higher for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I think if he ran this season 100 times, Kenyon Drake would outscore him 50 of those times.
I could see that, and I'm not the biggest Drake guy. So, but if you threw in like other names like Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, and stuff like I think that's the range he should be going in. But that's I had him in front of all those to begin with, and he's at 8, and 8's a really aggressive ranking in my opinion to begin with. And it really comes down to, are people overvaluing him just because of the offense he's in? He says he's picking up the playbook and it's super easy to him. There was a report from somebody that covers the team that says he's the first player he's ever heard, not rookie, just first player ever to say, oh, Andy Reid's playbook is easy to absorb. Andy Reid's playbook is a legitimate thing. Also, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire's ability to pass block. And that's one of the concerns he had coming out of college. There's a lot of shotgun coming from LSU. There's a lot of times where the running back didn't even need to, or being asked to pass block. So can he handle that? That's a big question for rookies in general, let alone in this offense. Again, we know what the upside is. It's just, you have to factor in some of the downside. And of anybody going in this range, of all those, I would say Drake and Clyde Edwards-Helaire have the two biggest bust potentials. And again, if you're taking them at 5, you're taking them in front of not just those, but guys that would seemingly, if healthy, have 0 bust potential in like Henry and Jacobs, or Henry and
Mixon,
the other
Cook.
one, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon. Yeah.
Yeah, so the big thing here, the reason that I compared him to Drake more than anyone else is that I think they have similar profiles and similar risk assessments of what you want this year. I look at that range that you talked about, the Chubb, the Jacobs, Chris Carson, Aaron Jones, that entire collection of running backs, the second round, early third round running backs, or mid-round second running backs, late first round. And I don't think that any of those guys have the potential to be the number 1 running back in fantasy football. I just don't. I don't think that their profiles match up. Could they be number 3? Sure, if they score enough touchdowns. Right. But based on the skills that they provide and the stats they put up, they just don't catch enough balls in order to make that leap to be the number 1 player. All things being equal in health, not affecting 99% of running backs or something like that. And people know what I'm saying when I talk about this. I hope, at least. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has a great unknown, but in his optimal role, he probably is the number 1 player in fantasy football. And I think that, to a lesser extent, that's why he's going later. The same thing applies to Kenyon Drake. If he's catching balls out of the backfield in that Arizona offense and he's the guy and he gets 20 touches a game and he controls the goal line, there is that path. Now, it is a very unlikely path, but as opposed to the Chubbs and the Josh Jacobs, that upside is higher. The downside is far greater because those guys are kind of steady Eddie. Right in the middle, they're going to do what they do. They get their set amount of touches, and maybe they do improve in the passing game, but they're not going to be a threat to catch 75 balls. You see what I'm saying?
I definitely see what you're saying. The one I'll disagree on the one factor is I just don't think there's number 1 upside. Just because I'll bring in the comparison with Austin Eckler last year, and that's what I'm talking about. That's the ceiling for Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Sure, but what was Eckler through the first 8 games? He was running back 3.
That's what I was gonna say, or the first 5, which people like to chop off the first 5 because the week 6 is where he had a poor game. Even both of those, to your point, it was 3. He was behind Cook and McCaffrey, and that's the thing. Is I don't see a path where he gets past McCaffrey or a healthy Saquon Barkley or even possibly Zeke Elliott. That's the thing. Is I don't see number 1 for either one of them. Now, top 5, yes. Can he be in the conversation with Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler if he's Austin Eckler like he was last year? Sure, but I don't see the path to a 1-2 finish.
I really like Kenyon Drake. I was really bummed not to get him in that draft. That's why I was really hoping optimally. We'll talk about the best spots to pick from here in a minute. Just some more news to go through when I talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Let's say you don't get him, but you still want to try to gamble with these extra bench spots, deeper drafts. Darwin Thompson, thin Lizzie McGuire, Darrell Williams. Who's the backup?
DeAndre Washington. That's the
and
one.
DeAndre Washington. That's correct. Yeah. Why isn't it Darrell Williams?
Because Darrell Williams just isn't that good.
But at least he's been used and been somewhat successful.
So is DeAndre Washington. He was very successful when Josh Jacobs missed time.
Sure, but
people forget that.
But Williams also has. I would just think that if he remains on Kansas City, that he would have the inside edge there.
No, I think that's the reason they brought DeAndre Washington in initially and this is before the draft. So this is some of the things that you see happen is they brought him in to be that backup plan because, he's just got that all around ability where he's not a top 10 talent, but he's proven time and again that he's all around ability that you can trust him. And he's the better version. He's the version of Peyton Barber that people want. It's like, he's good. And that's the thing is Darrell Williams has his limitation. Darwin Thompson, is passing game has his limitations for being a full-time runner. All these options in the backfield have limitations. DeAndre Washington might not peak out at a 9 or 10 in any one area, but he's a bunch of sevens in this offense. Put it this way, if we drafted today and there was no Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Damian Williams did sit out, I would be all in on DeAndre Washington as potential top 15. I think he is the option.
Well, if that's the case, then if you're confident about that, and I don't know if I'm as confident or you are. You're kind of sold me, though. We talk about Alexander Mattison, Latavius Murray as kind of the guys to have if the starter goes down. You want those guys. Those are potential top 5, top 10 running backs. You're saying that DeAndre Washington could be that guy as well, just with a bit more risk, not knowing for sure what the situation is.
Of course. And that's why, is because this is my assumption. This is my educated guess, as we always try to do in a lot of these clouded backfields or clouded situations. The difference between the ones you just mentioned, right? We know we know Madison's the backup plan. We know Murray's the backup plan. If we knew DeAndre Washington was the backup plan, we'd have him probably in front of those guys because he's on the Chiefs. But the thing that you mentioned is there's no guarantee that even if he is the backup plan, that they still don't sprinkle in Darwin Thompson or they still don't sprinkle in Darrell Williams. So that's the other issue there. So I think it's a good comparison to make between those. But the good part about it is because of that uncertainty, you're still, as of today, getting DeAndre Washington as the last pick in your draft. I don't even know if he's still even going inside the first 16 rounds of a normal draft yet.
So since the weekend, I really want to put out a lot of these injuries. So get Guice out of the way, just include drafts where he just wasn't available to be picked unless someone's a complete moron. Or Damian Williams. DeAndre Washington has gone as high as 121, as low as 240 with an average of 168. So he's been the last round pick for a lot of people. And I highly endorse that. He's still going ahead of Raquel Armstead, who's another potential, depending on Chris. I just don't see Chris Thompson taking over for Fournette if Fournette went down. I feel like Chris Thompson's role would stay the same. No. And Armstead would become the new Fournette type player. But I would prefer DeAndre Washington because he plays on the much better offense. But in terms of guys he's going behind, Justin Jackson and Joshua Kelly are still going ahead of DeAndre Washington. I can see Jackson just in case he's the first man up, but you're still on the back end of a split there either way. Anthony McFarland's still going ahead of him as a backup. We don't know if he's going to be the guy in Pittsburgh if James Conner goes down. So I think I would just rather gamble on the situation that's better. I'm kind of buying you here with DeAndre Washington.
And that's the thing is, so the ones that you just mentioned too, is DeAndre Washington has the chance to be the guy. He was the guy, Jalen Richard was still sprinkled in a little bit, but DeAndre Washington was essentially treated kind of as the lead option when Josh Jacobs was out. The two scenarios you just mentioned, I'm a Joshua Kelly guy, but I'm not saying Justin Jackson's definitively not going to beat him out, especially being a rookie. But if anything were to happen, it seems like they're going to share. The roles that you just mentioned is even when the lead option goes down, it's still a split backfield, maybe 60-40 at best. What we're looking at here is hopefully that DeAndre Washington, as has been the case often with Andy Reid anyway, as we know, gets 70% of the work because he doesn't like to sprinkle in guys too much. Last year was the first time in a long time we saw as many running backs get used week in and week out. I mean, even a specific week than Andy Reid has in some time.
Lamar Miller signs with the New England Patriots. Does this do anything fantasy-wise besides cast doubt on Sony Michel? Because now the reports are that he and his foot injury may not be ready for week 1. I've been grabbing Damian Harris in a bunch of spots. I don't know whether he's good or not. And I know James White keeps going in PPR drafts. Is the guy to take it just fucking Rex Burkhead again?
No, because Rex Burkhead always does little flashes here and there. What are you going to get 2 good weeks out of him? That's the biggest problem here. Just stay away. If anything, just draft James White in PPR. He's still going at a depressed value for being James White. And I understand there's concern that now Cam Newton is not Tom Brady, but Cam Newton does throw to the running back some. It's not like he never throws to the running back. So if James White even keeps 80% of his role, it's not sexy, it's not exciting, but at least it's somebody that you'll be able to use. The biggest problem here is now you're throwing darts at like who's going to be the guy. I don't know that the rest of the backfield is ever going to be a guy. And what a surprise is Bill Belichick. But like 1 week, it's probably Burkhead. The next week, it's Damian Harris. And Damian Harris, I think, is talented if he's healthy. That's the biggest question, is that he was hurt last year and then never really got a shot because he was trying to come back from the injury. And then by that point, Bill Belichick was like, screw it. You haven't even looked good when we've given you your opportunities that you've gotten. So Damian Harris is in the mix. Lamar Miller, who the hell knows what Lamar Miller is at this point? Like you said, the biggest news is that if you're signing Lamar Miller, you should have already been off Sonny Michel at his price to begin with. Now, I mean, I don't even know if I even want to waste my time. Even if Sonny Michel fell to the 11th, I don't even know if I want to waste my time drafting him because this looks so dark for what potentially is going on with his knees.
You can give me a straight pass on this one if it's just a complete non-factor in news. But again, with these expanded like fantasy rosters, that maybe some of these guys start hitting your radar. Miami, Albert Wilson has opted out, as has Alan Hearns. That leaves Jakeem Grant, Isaiah Ford, Ricardo Lewis, who just signed, and Chesta Rogers, who just signed. Now, this is for fourth on the totem pole behind Preston Williams, Devontae Parker, and Mike Gesicki. But do any of these guys potentially possess value? Because I feel like we all kind of like Jakeem Grant because he's so fast that maybe he could be more of a game breaker. I would like to see him win the role because I'd like to use him on like DraftKings. You can double dip with him as he returns kickoffs as well. But
yeah,
would any of these guys? Because like it's not like people were drafting Albert Wilson, although he was fourth in line. No, I know he's good.
Also, Albert Wilson has shown the flashes of being good. As it does actually two things for me is of all those. Well, the big thing too is Ricardo Lewis was actually let go and then brought back. So I don't think that casts a lot of excitement for what they think of him. More of a depth piece. Sorry, I'm not trying to be like a dick about it or anything, but I think like Isaiah Ford is the one that I'm intrigued with because it seemed at the time that they were drafting him to be the new slot option. And that's where Albert Wilson does a lot of his damage. And I'm not saying that Jakeem Grant can't do the same because you just mentioned his speed, but I think Isaiah Ford is who they wanted to step into this role if no Albert Wilson. So I would look to that, but it doesn't really do much for me wide receiver wise. What it does for me is I was initially cool on Mike Gesicki, mostly because he had one of the biggest opportunity shares of tight ends down the stretch last year and still didn't even rate inside the top 10 for efficiency, whether you talk about touchdowns, receptions, his drops were really high. Like it's just, or no, his drop. Actually, I don't think he dropped anything. That was the point. Yeah, he didn't drop anything, and it still wasn't very productive. So the problem with Gesicki is opportunity galore and still didn't produce. Like, so what was going to be better this year with a healthy Preston Williams? So now that you take Albert Wilson back out of the equation, I think you look at Gesicki possibly repeating what he did last year, maybe even improving to like 5-10% better. So now he starts definitely getting into that tight end one conversation.
In Oakland, the reports are that Bryan Edwards has passed Hunter Renfrow, and he is potentially now passed Tyrell the Gazelle Williams.
That should have been easy.
To be on the outside. Now he's getting a bunch of like sleeper hype. Oh my God, Bryan Edwards. So here's my problem with this. If they go out and they draft Henry Ruggs in the first round, who's definitely going to start, and no one wants to take him before like the 13th round in fantasy, why the hell does anyone care about Bryan Edwards?
Because people want the sexy fun thing to talk about, which makes no sense. And why you're not in on Henry Ruggs? You know this. I just wrote about it in my 20 most owned players. It's just I've been trying to do this since before the draft to tell people that Henry Ruggs is more than just a burner. He's more than just Ted Ginn. Like, stop with that nonsense. The other part of that news that was in there, mixed in there, Pat, was the fact that Henry Ruggs was seeing some slot work to get him open quicker and to get him more accustomed quickly as a rookie, because Bryan Edwards is an outside guy. He's not going to be working the slot. So you hear that and it's, oh my God, Hunter Renfrow is screwed. And you know what? Unfortunately for him, it looks like that's the case because Renfrow is probably like Cole Beasley type, which I know you have a fondness for the Cole Beasleys of the world. But that was Renfrow's job. And Renfrow looks like he's the one who's getting pushed out of the equation completely because you do need the outside guy, whether it's Tyrell or Bryan Edwards, to complement Henry Ruggs. And if those are the number one and number two, the number three is probably Edwards or Tyrell because Ruggs is going to be seeing some of that slot work. So bad news for Renfrow. I want to get too involved with Tyrell at all, pretty much. I would take a flyer on Bryan Edwards at the end of drafts because he's somebody that got overlooked in college because of some injuries. Probably somebody that could have been a first rounder if not for the injuries sidetracking him and what the path he was on. But at the same time, there's being a rookie. There's being a rookie with Derek Carr. I would just do what I've been doing. Just take Henry Ruggs and stop worrying about the rest.
Yeah, I don't have until something like noticeably changes, I have no real interest in Bryan Edwards at the moment. Maybe my mind can be changed on that. Green Bay. So reports are that, like we've been saying all offseason, Allen Lazard, the Lazard Queen, is going to be the number 2 in Green Bay because Devin Funchess has opted out for the season. But they just claimed your guy off waivers, Jake.
I'm getting my hat.
Travis Fulgham. There you go. They also are reportedly in talks with Malik Turner to come in and potentially be on the team too.
Basketball player?
Yeah, no, the former Seattle wide receiver who just like randomly spiked for like 3 games. There is your hat, the Old Dominion Mighty Monarchs. Like
they're not mighty; they're just plain old Monarchs.
Should we care about anyone not named Devontae Adams in this passing game?
Al Lazard, I think so. And look, I said this, and I wasn't kidding about it. And it's not just because I have a fondness for him. Like, if you're in a like you talk best ball, like I know everybody has value in best ball. I hate that cliche argument, but if you're in a super deep league that goes 22, the reason we say best ball is because not a lot of people play in rounds that go up or leagues that go up to the 22nd, 23rd, 24th round. That's where you start thinking about Travis Fulgham. And it's just like Travis Fulgham is a big outside receiver coming from ODU. Is a small school. Like I'll admit, ODU is not a good team, but he dominated, and I mean dominated against good talent in Conference USA. It's not upper echelon of the world, but we've seen small school players perform as at times. They're looking for an opportunity to find somebody to fill in for the number 2 role for Aaron Rodgers, despite not drafting somebody to be that. So if it's not Allen Lazard, it's just the fact that I don't have a lot of confidence in Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I don't have a lot of confidence in Jake Kumaro. I don't have a lot of confidence in anybody on that. And it's not just ODU. It's just, I did see a lot of them because that's my school. But I think that if Fulgham, let's put it this way, Pat. Number 2 receiver for the Packers. Like, you're guaranteed every single week he's going to be the number 2 receiver, seeing 80% of the snaps. You're going to take a flyer on that guy. It's why I drafted Devin Funchess and Scott Fishbowl in the 24th round or whatever it was. So I think that's the appeal here, but it's still Lazard as of today.
Yeah, Lazard has like decent value, but it feels like Fulgham was just brought in because he was on the Lions and might know that playbook. You see this a lot during this time of year, that guys on divisional teams will be brought in just so they can get some insight onto what the other teams are up to.
I think that's kind of overblown at times. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying they're just trying to get some intel, but I don't think would be the only reason. Look, he might not be even on the roster on week 1. It's not a guarantee. I'm more pointing at the fact of if we get some intel, which is tough this year because again, we don't have preseason games, but if we get some intel that if he's at least a number 3 behind Allen Lazard, now an injury happens and all of a sudden he's relevant. I think that's the only thing we need to watch here.
Yeah, and if something, God forbid, happens to Devontae Adams, guys could get propelled up pretty quickly because there will be
just forget it.
15 targets a game to go around. Are there any opt-outs on the offensive line that you think, besides Nate Solder, I suppose, but any ones that kind of stick out to you, be like, that could be a problem?
Did he opt out or did he just get COVID, the one from Tennessee? And now they were talking about the rookie that they drafted. They were going to have to slap in a tackle to start with. And now he might even be at left tackle. I thought one of those did, but I might be misremembering.
Anthony McKinney opted out.
That's not huge. I think Tennessee's line is looking a little bit shakier than we thought it would. But again, it's Derrick Henry, so I'm not overly concerned about that. I think the biggest one is what you just mentioned. Solder was terrible last year, but
so what you're saying is that this is a good thing.
No, it's not, because now you're talking about Andrew Thomas, who comes in, who was supposed to be starting right tackle from day one, might be forced to left tackle, which is fortunately where he played for all of his college career. But I'm looking. What the heck was the guy's name? I'm going down the list right now trying to find it. Oh, Matt Pert was the guy they drafted, I think, from Colorado or UConn. Maybe I think it was UConn, but he was supposed to be a development person. And now they're talking about he might need to start because of Solder. Saquon Barkley is definitively one of the best running backs in the NFL, but there's only so much you can do dancing around behind an offensive line that was already pretty poor last year. And you're throwing potentially 2 rookies in there, or a rookie and a journeyman. I'm looking up the other guy's name that I'm trying to remember. Cameron Fleming, all for Dallas. I mean, he might be in the starting lineup now. I mean, there's just a lot of questions there now.
Yeah, I think the biggest one to me would be Juwan James in Denver, only because they don't have any other tackles really to come in and replace them with.
That was a bad offensive line to begin with too.
And they tried to improve. They made some signings during free agency, but I initially saw Marcus Gilbert opted out for the Cardinals, the right tackle, and I was like, well, let me look into this a little bit. And they actually do have some depth at right tackle. It's not like Gilbert is the greatest right tackle in the world. James is someone
right.
Denver was going to be relying on to be not necessarily their best offensive lineman, but he had to be good for them to be good.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at who they have sliding in. So they have Bowles returning, and Bowles actually, I think a lot of people were expecting more from him. So hopefully he can continue to improve. Their right tackle right now listed as Calvin Anderson off the Jets. The Jets offensive line, if you're pulling somebody off the Jets to start on your offensive line, that's not good.
No. All right, well, let's talk about, before we get to the draft trends, let's talk about my draft that I did in your Snake PPR League. I'm just looking at it right now. I got the 5th pick. So when it got to me, I took Michael Thomas instead of Derrick Henry or Dalvin Cook or Joe Mixon or Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
You should have opted out. I gave you the option to opt out. You should have opted out.
Well, the reason that I took number 5 was I thought it would make for listen, this is a league that I could do a show, but I'm drafting it live. I think 5th is probably the worst pick you can get. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all really bad picks.
Yeah, I don't mind 5 as much because, like I said, my big 5 are Cook included. So if I get Cook or Kamara at 5, I'm fine with that. I will take Michael Thomas at 6, despite the fact I don't love, this. I don't love taking a wide receiver, but if he's there, that's where I'm going to go versus being the first one into that Henry group. But the biggest problem I have with it is I don't like where you come back. That's the issue. Is 5 and 6 in the second round, all the RB1s are gone. That tier of wide receivers, usually if Hopkins, or I'm looking right now, if Hopkins or Tyreek Hill end up coming off the board, Kelsey sometimes gets into that mix because Leonard Fournette should not have been drafted at that point. So you get all the way through Austin Eckler, Kenyon Drake. You get through the top 5 wide receivers. Kelsey might be gone. And now you're sitting there like, well, do I take a running back early? Do I jump down to the next tier of wide receivers like Juju Smith-Schuster, or do I draft Kittle kind of a half round too early? It's just, I hate that spot.
So after, you're right, because that was the trickiest part, was the second round. Now, I love Travis Kelce, so it wasn't that big of a deal for me to pick him there, but I won.
But what if he would have went? What would you have done? That's the thing. What if
I
Kelce...
probably, well, I mean, with the way this broke down, the 2 picks ahead of me, it went Fournette, then DeAndre Hopkins, then I took Kelce. That I probably would have taken Fournette over Hopkins, but if not, like, I ended up with Kenny Golladay in the 3rd round that I may have even reached for him there because I really like Kenny Golladay. That's how I ended up with him. So my start was Thomas, Kelce, Golladay, which looks incredibly crappy on paper. I'm not saying that it's good, but I just didn't know what else to do. Like you mentioned, all of the good running backs, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, gone off the board. I could have taken Aaron Jones. Maybe that could have been an option. I'm just not huge on Aaron Jones. I was talking this through in real time while we were doing the draft. I was like, oh, we'll take Gurley in the 3rd. I like Gurley. Then he goes 2 picks after. He went in the 2nd round. I was like, oh my God. Then I started trying to piece together, like, can I do that draft that we talked about where I get Kelsey and Kittle all at the same time? But he went at the turn, and then Lamar Jackson went. So when it came to me with Evans and Moore off the board in the 3rd round, my options were Mahomes, Golladay, James Conner, Melvin Gordon, Chris Carson. I like Conner. I like Carson. Carson probably could have been the pick, but I thought that like one of those guys would fall to like the 4th round. But then it just never happened. It happened right after Carson went that a huge wide receiver run happened, and then it didn't get back to me. And I ended up having to take Le'Veon Bell in the 4th round. And that was the pick that I really don't like. I wish I had just kept taking receivers at that point.
What was Tim's response when he took Le'Veon Bell?
He was pumped. Well, no, he hates Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell's the one Jet he doesn't like.
So that's I'll never enjoy.
So that's good news. And like I don't have a huge like Carson above Connor and Le'Veon Bell, but I have those 3 pretty close compared to the other jabronis in this region, like Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, Singletary, Marlon Mack, Ronald Jones. Like I think those 3 are substantially better fantasy options than the other ones. But just 5th.
Yeah,
5th was just a handcuff spot to be in. Like I don't like that pick. I draft that last out of all the picks.
I'm with you. I'm really high on Chris Carson. That article I was talking about with the top 20 owned players. I own so much Carson. I think I'm like at 90% or something like that. I'm huge on him this year. But it's funny you said that for the 5th pick because I had a similar scenario to you where it was the first time ever I went quarterback early because I was in the 5th pick of the draft. Now Cook felled me at 5 because Kamara went 4. And I didn't have to take Michael Thomas because Cook was still there for me. But it came back around, and I was just like, Kelsey had already gone. So I was just like, this is gross. And I took Mahomes. And not only did I take Mahomes, I doubled down by taking Mark Andrews in the 4th round. But my wide receivers ended up being so ridiculously still good because wide receivers so deep. I say that not to say like, hey, you were dumb to go wide receiver. It's just that every draft, like you just got to kind of have to find where the values are. Like if Darius Guice doesn't have his situation and gets yanked, I still like your team. I mean, your top 3 wide receivers. I mean, your top 2. Nobody's got your top 2 wide receivers matched to Michael Thomas and Kenny Golladay. You got the best tight end. You have Kyler Murray. You have Le'Veon Bell, who should be a still top 15 running back, even if he's just consistently boring at this point, only scoring 14 to 16 points a week. And then Jarvis Landry is the 3rd wide receiver. Like, that's a great start. The Darius Guice thing nobody could have seen that coming. I don't think it's the worst. It looks kind of gross, like you said, if you really break it down. But at the same time, for where the value fell, I don't think it's that bad.
And the structure of the league too, like knowing your league setup is really key in this. So in this particular league, you start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and 2 flex spots. So you have to start more receivers than running backs every single week anyway. And then in the 2 flex spots, I feel like my depth is so big at wide receiver, even when we go down the board. Like I still have Christian Kirk, I have Jerry Jeudy, I have Randall Cobb, I have Michael Pittman. Like I can, where a lot of teams will be playing like sort of a mediocre 3rd running back in one of those flex spots, I won't. I'll be playing like a higher upside wide receiver in that spot. So all I need now is for Bell, like you said, to be relatively mediocre, just be a real boring RB13 and have one of these other guys come through for me, whether it be Damian Harris or Chase Edmonds or Kamara gets hurt. I have Latavius Murray. If Alvin Kamara gets hurt and like my team stays healthy and Latavius Murray is healthy, like I might win this league pretty handily.
You might. That's a lot to ask. I mean, well, not a lot to ask, but it's just a big ask, I should say. Like, yeah, if Kamara gets hurt, if Drake gets hurt, that's really like if Connor gets hurt again, like, I mean, you've got 3 options where if somebody gets hurt, although Anthony McFarland, like you mentioned before, I don't know that he
may or may not be the guy, but the whole,
I think he'd be the guy.
But my whole thing was like, and this is what I talked through, was that because I wasn't able to get one of the best running backs, because I missed out on the first 4. And maybe you could argue Dalvin Cook's in that mix. I think he's very close. But I said I can get Michael Thomas. I can have the number 1 receiver, the best receiver. I'm going to put him on my team. And then when we got to the second round, I can have the best tight end on my team. I'm going to take the best tight end. And then I ended up with Golladay. It's like, I think he's like a top 5 guy potentially. So I'll take him too.
You have the best wide receiver too, and it's not even close.
And then when it got to Kyler Murray, this is where it got kind of crazy because I was going to take McLaurin or Chark, and they went 2 picks right ahead of me. But the 3 guys that I really wanted, as we talked about as we were doing it live, was Chark, Metcalf, and McLaurin. So I have it McLaurin, Chark, Metcalf, and they literally went the 3 picks before my pick. So I couldn't take any of them. And I was like, maybe David Montgomery will get back to me in the next round. I can just take him. And then he went the pick right after. But I took Kyler over Dak and Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. And I feel kind of stupid seeing where Deshaun Watson went now 2 rounds later. But at the same time, like I would have just happily taken Montgomery there or T.Y. Hilton and been on my way, or even Steph Diggs. But the reason I took Kyler versus Dak, Wilson, and Deshaun Watson was because of the almost like we talked about with Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the beginning. The reason that people are taking him so highly is because there's that unknown of him being the number 1 running back, potentially. If everything goes right, he's the number 1 running back. And I think that if everything goes right for Dak or Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson, and things still go right for Lamar and Patrick Mahomes, they're not cracking into the top 2. It's going to be Lamar and it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. I do feel, well, Kyler Murray might have a higher range of outcomes than these other quarterbacks. I felt like I had to shoot for the moon with Kyler Murray because I do think if everything breaks right for him, fantasy-wise, that he can be not run as much and score as much on the ground as Lamar Jackson can, but he can do like 60% of that and be way better in the air. So like he would have the potential to be the number 1 quarterback if everything broke right. That's why I took him.
And I can definitely see that because the thing with Kyler Murray is I don't even think he ran as much as he could, obviously, last year. And I'll compare it. Like, I think he's got Robert Griffin upside. Like, he's not Lamar Jackson for 1,000 plus, but if Kyler Murray ran for 7, 8 even, maybe even 800 to that point, and he's got DeAndre Hopkins, he has a terrific deep ball. He's a really good passer. We all know that the height concerns were way overblown. I agree with you. Like if you took them side by side and you said Lamar Jackson still runs for 1,000, but Kyler Murray gets 9 or 700 and that 300-yard difference. Well, that 300-yard difference sounds like a lot. That's 30 points. but Kyler in the passing game could easily close that gap, especially from a touchdown department with DeAndre Hopkins now in the fold. As good as Lamar Jackson was last year, that's all anybody keeps talking about, is that his touchdown ratio should pull back if he doesn't improve as a passer, which I think he can. And I actually am a Lamar Jackson fan in that facet. But if he doesn't, if he passes the exact same level he did last year, that touchdown ratio shouldn't be what it was.
So just because of the construct of my team, I felt like I had to shoot for upside where I already had, like I said, the best receiver, the best tight end. If I could potentially have the best quarterback, I don't need good running backs. And I really do think that there is some merit because of those
check
two
that box.
Because there's 2 extra flex spots that you only have to play 2 running backs. Remember the very first year of flex? This is basically how I drafted my team. I had like one mediocre. I think I had LaShawn McCoy, who ended up being like running back 11 that year. And I think Chris Thompson was my number 2, and he scored like 8 points a week. But that was good enough because you only had to play 2 running backs.
That Chris Thompson, I was going to go back and see if I could find it just to go look. Oh, what were you in the snake draft, right?
Yeah, I was in the snake PPR. That was the year that I won, and I came 3rd the year before that, I think.
Was that did you win? You won the end, but you were 2nd in the season, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, I was going to pull up your team real quick because it's let's see, your roster at the time at the end of the draft was Justin Forsett. That was Darren McFadden. That's why. Darren McFadden, Justin Forsett, Chris Thompson, James, and Jonathan Stewart. You just had a bunch of backup, throw them in your roster and see what happens.
Yeah, but I guarantee you the rest of my team looked super legit.
The wide receivers. So, yeah, Julian Edelman score over 200. Mike Evans score almost 300. Steve Smith score 180. Alshon Jeffrey scored 150. Cole Beasley scored 180. And then you had Jordan Reed scoring 160 as your tight end.
Yeah, so if you can hit on the other spots, your running backs don't need to be good when you only have to start 2.
And Andrew Luck, too.
Yeah, and there we go. And I bet you that was a good Andrew Luck year, wasn't it?
Yes, 300 points.
Yeah. So you have to get lucky with your other spots. But again, like I'm playing for first. I'm not playing for second. Like if I want to go one route, I think you have to. I'm not recommending 0 RB by any means. This is just how the draft presented itself to me. And you ended up with a team very similar to this in your auction, didn't you?
Yes. And that's the 100% because I hate 0 RB. And I actually kind of ended up with modified 0 RB because I do think Chris Carson is a bell cow. And I think he's disrespected. But my second running back, just like you, was Darius Guice. And fortunately, I do have Antonio Gibson, but at the same so Michael Thomas went out early. He was actually the second player thrown out, and I got him for 48. And that was the thing. It's like I was willing to go low 50s on him and jump into the 50s, but it stopped at 48. It's like, all right, fine. Kelsey was the 7th player thrown off the board. We had this argument on I referenced it while we were doing the draft. I referenced your argument with me about doing the Kelsey Kittle thing. And just as a whole, that I usually don't ever have either one of them because I'm not willing to draft in the 2nd round. But Kelsey stopped at 26. And I looked at it with your argument. And it's the same reason because I agree with you on this mention is the fact that if you put Kelsey at wide receiver, he's not $26. He's $36 at least. And that's what I'm looking at is like, well, 26, fine, I'll take him. Then I got Galladay for 28 and Keenan Allen for 18. So like, well, I guess I'm going wide receiver, tight end heavy. I might as well go this route. And that's just because that's where the value fell. Do I love it? This is a team I would draft in the snake draft? Absolutely not. But to your point about your draft in the snake and this entire point that we're having is you have to adapt. And sometimes it's not going to be the team that you love, but it's going to be the best team you can get from that spot.
The one case, not necessarily for 0 RB, but one thing that I'm not necessarily hoping for this, but I think if I just logically think about this NFL season, is that the backup running back is going to be an essential part of everyone's fantasy teams at some point if there are COVID breaks. I mean, just through normal attrition anyway, with injury, random backup running backs become big players in fantasy football. But if COVID now gets injected into this entire thing and guys have to take 2-3 weeks off, you can patch together running back much easier than you can patch together wide receiver. Davis had brought this up the last time that we had spoke about it. Now, Davis is all over the map, but this was a very good point, is that you can take, I don't know, Le'Veon Bell out of the game and insert Frank Gore. And Frank Gore will put up like 85% of Le'Veon Bell stats, or maybe even match them. But if Michael Thomas gets taken out of the game for New Orleans, Emmanuel Sanders isn't putting up 85% of Michael Thomas's numbers. That just isn't happening. It's just easier to replace the running back than it is a wide receiver because those targets get distributed to 3 other people instead of 1 other person or potentially 2 other people. That you can draw an easier connection from, oh, running back is out. Here is running back that is going to do it. If a wide receiver goes out, you're like, I don't really know where the targets are going.
Right. I mean, like Kenny Galladay. Like Kenny Galladay comes out, is it going to be Danny Amendola putting up a top 10 performance?
No.
Probably not. And that's really good. So like a lot of it's going to funnel back to Marvin Jones and TJ Hawkinson. And like, that's what you look at with the wide receiver position is it. And this is the argument of where bell cow inherently comes from anyway. It's the guaranteed touches every single week. But to the discussion we're having now is that replaceability is easier for this. And that's actually what I ended up doing. Even more so than you did, and not just because you were in the snake, but I was in the auction, so I had a little bit more ability to do so, is on my bench, I have Boston Scott, Philip Lindsay, Duke Johnson, Anthony McFarland, Antonio Gibson. Like, I hammered running backs with potential splits, if not upside for more, on my bench. And to go back to your team as a comparison, Deebo Samuel is my fourth, who I can wait on because I have Sterling Shepard as my fifth and Henry Ruggs as my sixth. Like, this is like, now I'm done at wide receiver. I don't need to even worry about picking up a hot name in week 2 at wide receiver. I'm going to do what you're going to be doing in your league, and that's just going to be looking for the running back opportunities.
Yeah, and I would think that better options at running back will present themselves at a higher rate week to week than they will at wide receiver. I think that's just very logical to think about that way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the one thing I did too was draft a second tight end, only because I wasn't going to let Hunter Henry go for $6. Well, I mean, more than like I was just like, I don't want Hunter Henry, but $6, get the hell out of here. I guess he's on my team.
So what other draft trends did you just kind of stuck out to you? Because you monitored all of the different drafts that went on. Were there players that like just you didn't think would go as highly and just kept going highly everywhere? You're like, oh, that's strange.
The one I hate more than most everybody in football. It's the wide receiver, Pat. I think he's the Jared Cook of wide receivers. You know what I'm talking about? He wins DraftKings lineups.
Oh, Will Fuller. This is probably the better year for Will Fuller than any year, just with so much uncertainty. Take the high upside guy.
It is, but to still see him sneaking into the 5th, 6th round, I just like Brandon Cooks. Like, I understand Brandon Cooks is huge injury risk with the concussions at this point. But if you're telling me everybody's healthy, Brandon Cooks is the number one. Why is everybody acting like Brandon Cooks sucks? Like,
Brandon Cooks came out today and said that his concussions, he's not worried about them. Now, he may have forgotten he had the concussions. That's could be part of the issue. But I think I'd be plenty concerned about concussions.
Look, and that's the thing, like Wes Welker towards the end of his career. Yes. And that's the thing. We know the science, we understand it. Eric Lindros in hockey is 1 concussion. It's easier to get 2 and 3, and it's just exponentially gets worse.
I believe that was Brett Lindros.
No, it was Eric Lindros.
No, Brett Lindros was the one who had his career ended by concussions. I think maybe that happened to Eric Lindros like 13
Eric
years
Lindros had a lot of concussions too.
Yeah, but he played for like 13 years.
He did, but it racked up at that point because he was on the Rangers. That's why I remember. But the point being here is with Will Fuller. If Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks are both healthy, which is the assumption people are making about Will Fuller, who has like soft tissue injuries lower leg injuries starting to rack up. Like, we're worried about Sony Michel and Todd Gurley and all these, and everybody's just like, Will Fuller, he's going to be fine now. He's like, the guy doesn't play a full season, and he's a deep threat. Like, the upside that people get excited with is because he scored 2 touchdowns in like 3 straight weeks, or had the 8 touchdowns over 4 or 5 games or whatever it was. Look at the rest of that season. Like, there was a lot of single digit performances. Will Fuller is Deshaun Jackson, the new Deshaun Jackson, which is fine, but to draft him like in the 5th round, like you asked me, like I was just surprised to see him go there. I wouldn't take him over a lot of the guys he went in front of. I understand it. Like, if he plays 16 games and he is the number one and Brandon Cooks does get hurt, give me some Will Fuller, but I just don't understand that one. For the other trends, I will say I was surprised that tight end fell as far as I think everybody's so disenfranchised from what happened last year with the tight end two tier 2, if I could say it, that you and I continually talk about and say, don't even draft that tier, that we saw Darren Waller, Hunter Henry, Evan Ingram in your draft fell to round 7. We saw Rob Gronkowski and Hayden Hurst, who I love Hayden Hurst, in round 9. In my draft, I just mentioned that Hunter Henry went for $6. I'm looking at the other one. Darren Waller was in the 6th round of the other one. Tyler Higbee in the 8th. Hunter Henry in the 9th. Noah Fant, Evan Ingram in the 9th. People are just there's the real takeaway. I will say that if you don't want to draft Kelsey or Kittle, wait, because you can just wait on tight end apparently.
And it's, if you can jump the board and get those guys, those two are the most valuable. It's like getting Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. Like, I feel like kind of a schmuck for taking Kyler Murray where I did. That's just how the draft was falling to me, and that's what I felt like in the moment I had what I wanted to do. But, like, Matt Ryan in the 10th, Cam Newton in the 12th. Where did my guy Daniel Jones in the 13th round?
Your guy.
Like, there are guys to take late, like the middle tier of like Wentz in the 8th, or Drew Brees in the 8th, or even Josh Allen in the 7th. Like, no.
Like, no. I mean, Matt Ryan fell all the way to the 10th.
Yeah, like,
the 10th.
like Matt Ryan is a substantially better pick. And obviously, in looking at this in retro, like in hindsight, and to say, oh, like, yes, Matt Ryan in the 10th is a substantially better pick than Drew Brees in the middle of the 8th round. He just is. Like, you get 2 more rounds of value for someone who's probably better anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's the big. So the other takeaway is, and you can see it if you look at the draft boards, and I tweeted them out. Not so much the super flex because you get that overlay of all the quarterbacks sprinkled in there, but you can kind of still see it if you look at the colors. So blue is running back, green is wide receiver. All 5 drafts, the best ball still isn't finished yet, but all 5 drafts you can see there's like around 16-ish running backs the first 2 rounds, and then they disappear for the next 3 and don't really start hitting again until round 6. And I think that kind of goes to how your team fell. It's like, if you say, well, maybe I'll wait on David Montgomery, or maybe I'll wait and see if Chris Carson goes. Like, the first 2 rounds, you're not going to be able to wait on anybody. And if you wait again, just 2 or 3 picks is going to drop you an entire tier where you're going to be waiting until the 6th or 7th round to get your second quarterback or second running back.
Yeah, if I was looking at that 3, 4, 5, 6 range at running back, if I didn't take a running back in the first 2 rounds, I think my targets would be Carson, Connor, Bell, Montgomery. It's probably.
I don't even love Montgomery.
I don't love Montgomery, but I think that he's safe volume, if nothing else. And like I would have preferred. Like, I thought I was going to get him in the 6th, and he just didn't materialize there. He went in the 5th. I guess Cam Akers could be super interesting too. I wouldn't reach on Akers, but I'd be good if he fell to me in the 6th round, which is where he went here. Like, he was going to be after Montgomery when I was like, oh, maybe Akers will make it. No, didn't happen.
Yeah. Or Raheem Mostert. I mean, I don't want anything to do with the Shanahan backfield, but if he kept the job the entire year, I mean, Raheem Mostert in the 6th is going to be an insane value.
Yeah,
that's the biggest.
I think that there's too much risk baked into that based on how they go
but
just even week to week, whether he stays healthy or not. Like, he could have 6 really good weeks and then 10 really awful weeks.
Right. I completely agree. And I was going to go back to, so my bell cow thing is not only the fact that I'm taking a running back almost always in the first round, unless Michael Thomas falls to like 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. But even if he does, I'm usually going running back to double. I would say 9 out of 10 times the auction is a little bit different. So throw that when I'm talking about typical snake drafts, I'm getting 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds. And I say that to this point that we're talking about right here is I don't have to make this decision about David Montgomery. I don't own David Montgomery anywhere. I don't own Kareem Hunt. I don't own Mostert, Akers, any of these guys, because I'm drafting wide receivers. I'm taking Terry McLaurin and DK Metcalf and Marquise Brown and AJ Green and T.Y. Hilton. I'm taking those guys in this range, and I feel better about that because those are type of names that have wide receiver 1 potential in the 5th, 6th round. And I don't have to make this annoying. Do I really want David Montgomery? Do I really want crappy Le'Veon Bell? No, I took care of my running backs, and now I can go attack this wide receiver value, which is just insane in my opinion.
Well, yeah, the receiver value in the 4th round, I think 2 of the best picks in the draft that I was in came right before I picked Bell. They came off the board, but Robert Woods, 2nd pick of the 4th round. Adam Thielen, the 4th pick of the 4th round. That's
ridiculous.
Nuts. Like, I would be good with a wide receiver core of Woods, Thielen, and one of Chark, Metcalf, and McLaurin. I feel like I would have 3 top 20 guys.
Love that.
And I could take those rounds potentially 4, 5, and 6, depending on if I was in a less sharp draft than this. But let's say I had to take them 3, 4, and 5. It's probably a reach on one of those guys in the 3rd round. But I could have the way this broke down, I could have Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake, and then like 4 of those guys as my team, which would be awesome.
And that's the big appeal here. I'm trying to pull up the draft I recently did, which it almost became a 0 wide receiver. And hold on, I'm going to pull it up real quick for you here so you can understand the value that I'm agreeing with you on the value, obviously, is I ended up going, who did I take? Miles Sanders in the 1st round. Then Nick Chubb was still there in the 2nd round. And Chris Carson was still there in the 4th. I'm like, well, definitely doing that. Even with that, 3 of my first 4 picks are running backs. I still came out with Devontae Parker, Allen Robinson, Marvin Jones, Deebo Samuel, Sterling Shepard, and Preston Williams. Like to still come out of my draft with those wide receivers and to have those 3 running backs as my first 4 picks is just that's the proof right there that wide receiver is ridiculously deep this year. And somebody's going, 2 or 3 guys are going to fall, because even if you're a fan, it's what you and I talked about. You can mix up everybody from like wide receiver 13 to 25. And because of that, people are taking their guys, but the other ones are falling.
All right. I think that'll do it. Pat Mayo Experience, Jake Ciely from theathletic.com. You let everyone know what you got going on, okay?
I just like you just follow me at All and Kid. I tweet everything out. I just released my top 20 owned players after last week, the players that I hate my projections the most and I pretty much don't own. So that's what's going on. And then next week I'm doing a little draft 101, Pat, because it appears that like a lot of people come to us still. And it's funny, like we kind of forget people that are like this out there. Like, hey, I've never done an auction before. What do I have to do? I've never done fab. We're moving from waivers to fab this year. What do I need to do? So I'm doing a little bit of a draft 101, or not draft, I guess fantasy 101 next week. Good God, my brain's tired.
Yeah, but your brain's tired and football hasn't even really started yet.
I know.
So just
I should have done like Brandon Funston and taken a vacation in August. Who does that?
I don't know. I took my honeymoon in August.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's why you couldn't do the draft last year.
Yeah, what? I got married 3 years ago, but okay.
Was it?
We tend to go. We tend to.
No, I know. I'm trying to think what was last year. Was it baby last year? Why couldn't you do it last year?
I was at a wedding last year, and my wife told me I wasn't allowed to draft from a wedding again.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, you were at a wedding. You're always at a wedding for some reason.
Not anymore.
Like Meany. Why does Chris Meany go to 7,000? How many friends does Chris Meany have?
I went through a period, like I think between the ages of 20 and 29, I went to like 3 weddings, and then from 30 to 34, I went to 36 weddings.
Oh my God. Here, I'll make you feel better, Pat. If I ever do finally get married, I'll send you an invite that I'm only sending it to be, you're a friend of mine. You don't have to fly in from Canada. So you can decline to come.
Yeah, listen, I'll come. I want to go to Virginia Beach. Sounds nice.
You have to think about where I lived.
Yeah, I did. I was going to say, where does he live again? Oh, yeah, Virginia. That's right. Anyway, Jake, thank you for being on. We'll re-up on some more news hits, too. Go to theathletic.com, and you can check out all of Jake's work. You can find all my work in the description of this video and podcast. The entire free draft kit is down there and up on dknation.com as well. Like the episode for the video version, rate and review the audio version. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at the PME. Ranks in the description as well. Not Adam Rank, my rankings for football. Check those out. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!